All right, Chris, we had a story we wanted to take a bit of a closer look at. So I'm going to pose a question to you. A cloud giant, an inconfigured security permission on a storage bucket, an embarrassing data exposure. Who am I talking about? I'll give you a hint. For once, it's not Amazon. Because Microsoft's AI division just found out that they made a little mistake. 3 years ago, they accidentally leaked 38 terabytes to a public GitHub repo while they were contributing to AI learning models. A security research team just this week found out that there was that exposure, which came from a misconfigured Azure Blob storage URL that was overly permissive and difficult to manage. Shared Access Signature, or SAS, is a tokenized system that's designed to give teams full control over file sharing. However, according to the security researchers, it is very difficult to manage, makes it appear almost impossible to make it do what you want to do, and that's where we ended up. The leaked data included passwords, keys, and an archive of internal Microsoft Teams messages. Now, I know that Microsoft Azure has gotten egg on its face a lot recently because of misconfigurations, key theft, and now turns out about 38 terabytes worth of oopsie that got published for 3 whole years. So, Chris, you and I both kind of love to talk about the security stuff, and I don't think that we're talking enough about this move fast, break things, expose the world kind of mentality that's happening. So I'm going to let you kind of start out here. Not only about this particular leak, but in general, when it comes to Azure, are customers starting to lose faith in Microsoft's ability to keep them safe?
It's an interesting question, and I don't know, right? I mean, if you remember back the beginnings of cloud, the first kind of heartburn that people had around moving to public cloud things was security, right? There was a lot of enterprises, a lot of companies that just at the very beginnings wouldn't do it, wouldn't think about it. It was not an option because of these security concerns. This, whole idea of the shared security model has kind of grown out of that, where, and it's not just, Microsoft and Azure, right? It's also Amazon and AWS. It's also Google and GCP. It's Oracle and OCI across the board, right? All the way down, DigitalOcean, everybody, right? Linode, whoever you're talking about. There's this shared security model, and it's kind of like, hey, it reminds me a lot of the demarcation kind of battles in early telco days, right? Where, where does the service end? If your router breaks, do you call AT&T or do you have to deal with it yourself? And how do you figure that out? And we've done this in the cloud as well, where we say, okay, we're going to secure our infrastructure. You secure everything on top of it, which seems to make sense at first blush. But as we've seen here, even Microsoft's own team, right? People who work at Microsoft couldn't figure out how to secure Microsoft's cloud for their own data, right? Whether it was confusing or they just missed a button or whatever. And so I think it may require us to start kind of rethinking that shared security model a little bit, at least in terms of defaults, right? Why is everything default open? Should it be default closed instead? Are there additional ways that these cloud giants now can help their users, who are often not massive teams coming out of Microsoft, but small businesses, startups, right? Folks who don't have a dedicated security staff, who don't have dedicated cloud architects who are going to go in there and learn all the things about every cloud to be able to figure out how to secure everything. How do we make this simpler and easier to use? I think better defaults is one way. Easier control panels and things like that is another way. But I think this is a problem that definitely needs to be solved. Whether or not folks are lighting their torches and bringing their pitchforks to Microsoft's gates just yet, I think we maybe should to some degree.
I think you're right. And one of the problems that you run into is, and this happened to me a couple of weeks ago working on a completely unrelated product. I wasn't even working on an IT thing, but someone had created this really complicated way to share audio between a speaker system and everything like that. And it worked really well as long as he was messing with it. And then as soon as somebody else had to touch it, nothing made sense. And so the problem that we run into when we create these, like SaaS is a really good example, not software as a service, but the security access method that Microsoft has created. It's overly complicated. Like if Microsoft can't figure out how to permit these files only to be shared and then nothing else, you have to go back to the drawing board. When you look at what was in that particular bucket that was shared, like my security alarm bells just started ringing. It's like, why were you co-locating AI models with internal chat archives, with keys, with passwords, with Microsoft's employee backups? Like, In a perfect world, none of that makes sense to be in the same bucket. That needs to be separate buckets. I don't care if you've created the security structure that says, well, we're only going to show you this, we're only going to show you that. It's like preventing a fire. How do you prevent a fire? You don't keep the things that can burn next to things that are a flame source. And in this case, if those things had been separated out by buckets, let's just say that SAS didn't work for this particular bucket. If you had only exposed maybe a couple of AI models that you weren't intending to get out there on the internet, big deal. But now, like, you've got to answer for the fact that you stored 38 terabytes of data in a bucket to begin with. You left it so that nobody really understood how it worked. Like, can you not run an audit report and go, okay, this is what I can see, this is what I can't, this is what these users can see? Like, there's basic security tenets that are being violated here. And I think that, we talk about it all the time in the industry. You've got to understand those basics. You've got to get back to that. Principle of least privilege doesn't mean anything if you are just leaving stuff out for people to find. Like, think about, is something as simple as, like, go back to Mission Impossible in the 60s. Like, we put the folder in the safe. Well, now it doesn't matter who has the rights to read the folder. If the safe is locked and nobody knows the combination except for one person, that's the arbiter of who can see the data. We're not going to just say, okay, well, we're going to put it in this box and we're going to put the box in the corner and we're going to make sure that only a couple people know where the box is. All it's going to take is somebody to go over and start looking through the boxes to find it. And I know that it kind of seems like almost kitschy and retro to talk about it like that. But when we had to secure data that was printed somewhere, we had a lot more stringent security protections because we were so worried that people were just going to blunder in and find it. And now that everything is computerized and digitized and stored places, we think, oh, well, we'll just create access rules and people won't be able to see it. Yeah, they won't until you misconfigure the access rules and you don't have a little alarm bell that goes off going, hey, did you really mean to do that? And I think that one place that Amazon has actually done a really good job of this recently is they have changed the permission model for S3 buckets to be overly less permissive by default. We're not just going to open the whole thing up and make you go in and secure it. We're going to secure it, basically lock it down and make you go open things up. One, it keeps them from getting egg on their face when something goes wrong. But two, it forces you to make the active decision to expose this particular data. So that means that if you come back later and go, well, I didn't mean to do that, then Amazon can go, well, you did check all 4 of these boxes to say that you did want this to be shared and you opened it to the public or whatever. That's on you, not us. Microsoft is going to have to get to a model like that. And it needs to be clear-cut, straightforward, easy to understand. If you click this box, these things will be exposed. Here's a list of those things. If you are okay with this, click I agree or type I agree or something like that. And I don't think that the cloud issues are going to go away just because cloud is hot and new and exciting. I think they're going to get worse as we continue to dump technology out there that isn't quite ready to go. We need more of a testing structure to make that happen.
Yeah, I agree. And, I wonder if it's not worth kind of thinking back to some more traditional data center security approaches or models, Tom. I mean, I won't advocate network address translation as a security mechanism, but putting things on their own VLANs that are not accessible to the internet and only accessible through, different gateways or jump boxes or things like that. There's a lot of practices that we may have given up with the public cloud where we're just kind of everything is online on the internet by default. It's really interesting. I do take your point that we do have this shared responsibility, right? I mean, our teams do need to pay attention to what they're doing. But I think also the platforms themselves need to provide easier ways to be more secure, and especially by default.
Yeah, I would agree. And we're going to continue to cover these stories because this problem isn't going to go away. And Microsoft is in a bit of turmoil right now. Because you may recall, there have been outside people who have stolen signing keys and they've gotten access to things that they shouldn't. I think that it's a lax security procedure in general that needs to be addressed. Maybe we need to get some security training videos and have the Microsoft team go through them, the basics, like, this is where we store things. This is where we don't store things. This is how we need to make sure we do that kind of stuff. And more importantly, I think the teams need to integrate more. They need to understand that just because you drop something in a bucket doesn't mean that it's, safe forever. In fact, one of the smartest things that I've ever seen from a security perspective has been just assume that you've been breached. What can they see? If the answer is too much, then the solution is not to lock the controls down. It's to move the data somewhere where it can't be accessed. And I think if we get back to that, if we take a little bit more time up front to plan it properly, we're going to spend a lot less time on the back doing PR work to help people understand, oh, no, really, it wasn't that bad.